You had this long.
Thanks for
Sick.
the update.
Welcome to discussion session for Tuesday, January 28th, 2025. If you want to get us rolling.
Thank you, Mr. President. Tonight's agenda, we have the public hearing. Consideration of an ordinance amending the Mount Lebanon Code to include newly enacted ordinances or amendments to existing ordinances enacted since January 23rd, 2024. This is the codification that we go through every year. All these ordinances were approved through the prior year. We have the consideration of agreement for settlement and release of claims. This was related to a claim at the Recreation Center. We have the consideration for award of a contract for professional service to identify the optimal approach for the delivery of emergency medical services. We'll cover that a little bit later in discussion. We also have the consideration to purchase one ready-to-use four-wheel drive snowplow truck through CoStars. It's a replacement of a 2014 model. And then consideration to purchase one fully equipped heavy-duty dump truck, also through CoStars, the 2016 model. And then consideration to purchase one Tarco Windy 400 leaf loader to replace a unit that's reached the end of its useful life. That's all we have, Mr. President.
All right, first item on deck, or I guess second item technically, Greg, it's already there. Let's roll. Beautiful.
Much appreciated. Thank you for having me this evening. Looking to provide some comprehensive updates on the municipal fleet efficiency plan that we're working on currently. And towards the end, if you haven't looked at the slides already, I'm just looking for some direction at the end. So feel free to ask any questions throughout. You don't have to wait till the end. So currently, some progress to date. As you can kind of see in front of you right now, we have the fleet electrification assessment follow-up points from Mount Lebanon. So this document that is provided from Duquesne Light is actually a follow-up from a department head meeting that we had with obviously the departments here and then with the Duquesne Light staff. So this is kind of a breakdown of pretty much what we talked about with what certain departments need, such as snow plows, and also what we talked about last discussion session, like police functions as well. So kind of the first topic is charge and idle times. They go over, the statistics on idle times in the summer and the winter and things like that. And, kind of like a daily usage that the EVs would have, basically, a administrative hours, like, 8:30 to 5 rather than 24-hour use. And then we can kind of go into this chart a little bit. I'm just going to kind of run through it real quick. Feel free if you have any questions, but the chart can kind of be, I guess, fine-tuned a little bit. Some of the numbers we need to go back with Duquesne Light and kind of mention that there are some certain ones in here that can't be. So like, for example, if let's start at the top of the bucket truck. Two of the bucket trucks, one is for the tree crew and one is an electrician. We've kind of I've talked with Rudy and I've talked with the electrician that there are options with those as well. It's a diesel fleet, or not diesel fleet, it's a diesel vehicle with an electric boom. So there's an electric component to that. So with the tree crew truck right now, it's obviously it's going through its rotation, but the electrician's truck, that's something that they would consider, barring they're able to get a demo out and things like that. Going down to the 9 heavy duty trucks, kind of going to that item on the regular agenda, looking to reduce or replace that heavy duty truck right now, which obviously those are snow plows. So there are no current snowplow compatible models for electric vehicles currently. We may see that change in the next couple of years with technology and things like that. But as of right now, any vehicle that is required to be a snowplow, there is no other alternative option besides gas or diesel. So that kind of covers most of those. Kind of going down to the light duty pickup trucks. There's a few, there's 3 actually within those 7s. Within that 7 that are plows. So there's 1 that's designated to the recreation and 2 that are for parking.
Just a quick step back. So there's no EVs that have plowing capability within CoStars or anywhere available?
At all. Yeah, there's no vehicles that are plow capable.
Can I interrupt you for 1 second? A couple of years ago, New York City had tried to utilize some of their garbage trucks and put plows on the front of those vehicles. They were electric.
Yeah.
Because of the required energy it takes to move that plow from side to side, they just couldn't get the runtime and the functionality out of those vehicles for that
Right.
use.
Right, okay. Okay,
And then moving down through one of the light duty pickup trucks is actually owned by the Mount Lebanon Fire Department Relief Association. Another one is a PA one call truck. It's in our public works department. Another one is operated by the facilities manager. That's it's kind of like a staff vehicle, so it's our facility manager, Phil Volio, it's his truck. And then last one is the garage pickup truck, which, to my understanding, talking with the public works staff, is like a kind of like a multi-purpose use. It has a fuel tank on the back just in case things like, it would need.
Somebody runs out of gas.
Someone runs out of gas, needs a
Yeah.
top up, and any type of other transportation. And then moving into the light duty pickup truck for the police department, one of those is a traffic unit. I'm pretty sure that's the unmarked, or it's the blackened version, I should say. And then the other one is a community outreach vehicle. Both of those are Ford F-150s. Again, assessing with the police matters and things like that, we would kind of look at what those needs are, whether they're 24-hour, whether they're Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. Moving on to the medium duty, 10 of those vehicles, as you can see, 3 of them are recommended and 13 of them have been assessed. 10 of those vehicles are plow trucks. So those are the lighter duty ones.
Right.
Again, on the agenda items for tonight for the regular meeting, one of those medium duties are looking to be replaced. And then the 3 other vehicles that are recommended, one of them is a Ford F-350, that's the line painting vehicle. Another one is a Ford F-150, 350, which is the plumber's vehicle that was just replaced last year. And then this last one is the carpenter's vehicle, which is currently running its course of its useful and will end of its useful life. We actually had a demo last week with the Chevy Bright Drop. It is a bread truck style of van, so to speak. Chevy actually introduced it last year. It's a 2024 is the first year. I was actually able to demo it at an electric vehicle demo at CCAC. I thought it would be a decent alternative to look at. So we had it down for a demo. We had our staff look at and staff drive it. Unfortunately, it does not have the right amount of power capacity on the inverters to run tools as the carpenter would use, miter saws, power saws, any type of drilling. So we kind of assessed that, and sadly it would not. And for us to look at updating that, or I should say upgrading, would be, out of the scope of any type of upfitter that can be done, whether it's like tapping into the battery, which I don't think most upfitters, I think Rudy can confirm most upfitters or any upfitter would want to do that. So that's something we actually demoed recently. So I'll kind of get into that a little bit further. Moving forward was that minivan. That minivan is actually just a kind of a people mover / cargo mover for the recreation department. Talking with the recreation staff, it's kind of multi-purpose. It's just a minivan to move stuff around. I've been told that it could be a pickup truck, it could be an SUV, could be a minivan. So it doesn't really have a specific use, whether they're just moving things around.
So why isn't it recommended? I mean, that seems to me to be.
Yeah, I was actually kind of surprised looking at the chart.
Yeah.
I think that possibly they might have thought that it was strictly a minivan usage where there's no current minivans that are electrified.
Yeah.
So we could, again,
I see.
again, a lot of this can be back and forth with
Yeah.
Buchanan Light. And then like, for example, the next one is the sewer truck. So that is something that we get specifically made for the sewer functions. So there's no alternatives there. The sedan is actually the parking vehicle that's electric right now. It's the 2021 Chevy Bolt that's used by the parking staff that has the license plate readers and things like that. The street sweeper, there is an electric alternative for the street sweeper.
You bring it in here.
We currently lease.
Rudy's on
So that's one of the items that actually we informed them that we lease the street sweeper.
We do not lease the streets.
Oh, we don't, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
we go through a private company.
That's a contract that's awarded on an annual
Gotcha.
basis.
Gotcha, thank you for the clarification.
Rudy will take one if it's elected.
Don't give them. Just-
That's something that they assessed, so they put that in the recommendation. But these next two, actually, there's a little bit of discrepancy. The numbers are a little skewed on this. There's actually 12 SUVs that are non-police and 18 SUVs that are police functions. So there's a numbers, I don't know where the numbers got skewed there a little bit, but there's 12 SUVs that are non-police. One is the manager's vehicle,
Oh, yeah,
two are public works admin,
sure.
the superintendent, and then the public works director. two have been passed down through the inspections department that are currently there. One is with the parking department, and then 6 are actually fire vehicles as well. Again, that's a separate function, radios and things like that, emergency management. So, and then going to the police, again, we rehash, I don't want to rehash it like we had in our the
No.
last discussion session, but
Right.
those are pursuit vehicles. Those are, a little bit of a special topic when it comes to assessing the needs of those vehicles, pursuit and things like that. And then finally, we're going into the vans/cargo vans. 2 of those are the police departments. One of those is actually owned, I think, or partnership through Shake Hogs, but that's again, different functions and different needs there. And then the last one is the sewer camera van that we actually just purchased last year, which has all the televised functions for the sewer department. So that's pretty much this quick little overview of the vehicles that we have currently assessed. And just kind of giving that background information on where these vehicles sit at, why they've been recommended or why they haven't been recommended. So jumping a little bit further, the next kind of progress to date, I should say, is I've introduced to the resiliency board and also the financial management board, just kind of an introduction of what we're planning to do in these next couple of months, getting their feedback as advisory boards, and kind of understanding where we're going to look at goal wise. And I know there's 2 members of the financial management board that have actually been doing some data analysis and fleet analysis, things like that. So I'm looking to actually meet with them in the next coming weeks. I think one of the members is out of the country for a couple more weeks. So I'll be looking to meet with them in the following weeks to hopefully get some, to share some data, to share what we've collected and share what they've collected, kind of get a good understanding of where we're at. And I think with the resiliency board is really kind of aligned, making sure this plan and these steps are being aligned with the comprehensive plan regarding resiliency, specifically the 6th recommendation, which is the encouragement of the transition to carbon neutrality. And part D and E actually are the charging stations, infrastructure, and then also a transition to electric fleet. So making sure we're aligned with those and kind of moving forward with the subcommittees, where I'm not too sure what the financial management subcommittee is called, but it's the local ecology and sustainability subcommittee on the resiliency board. So we'll be meeting with them in the next couple of weeks, looking for their feedback and see what information they want to take through their boards and see what their boards would like to either discuss with the commission and things like that, or just kind of keep staff wise. Also attended a couple of demonstrations. We had a demonstration here at the Public Works site last week. Also in December, I attended an EV demonstration at CCAC West. I actually found out that they have a electric vehicle technician apprenticeship program. I think it's the first in the state or even the county. It's pretty, I guess it's a pioneer type of program they have, but it's a pretty comprehensive program on electric vehicle technicians. And a lot of these technicians are actually moving towards going to work for factories and things like that. But they're also technicians who work at different shops and things like that want to be knowledgeable on the topics of electric vehicles. And then I actually had a discussion with the manager of West Mifflin, who has been a municipality who has been implementing some electrification when it comes to garbage trucks and when it comes to fleet vehicles. And currently, they're actually waiting on the delivery of the garbage truck. I think he said that might be coming in July. And then they're also waiting on the installation of a DC fast charging station. So that's one of the larger ones, a little bit more infrastructure need there. And then that'll be strictly for the garbage truck. But they currently only have 3 vehicles, 1 admin, 1 codes vehicle, and then a police vehicle. But that police vehicle is also an admin vehicle. It was actually originally designed to be a pursuit vehicle or patrol vehicle, but it did not meet those needs and meet those functions of the pursuit. So it's just an administrative vehicle right now. It is an F-150 Lightning. So it's that Ford F-150. I think a little bit of their lessons learned kind of moved in towards not scheduling any current vehicle purchases right now, because they want to understand on how these functions work. Again, with the police vehicle was one of the bigger lessons there. And then a larger one was really understanding how different seasons affect. And for a fact that Brian, the manager there, mentioned that the cold weather does in fact affect the battery life, but for those I should say, the admin vehicles, where it's administration or codes, it doesn't put a detriment on it for it to be used. It's more of a, you have to plug it in at night once the day is over. It's not during the day you have to charge it, but it's making sure it's plugged in at the end of the day. So, but as they come up into the summertime, you know, the cold weather, I should say, not the cold weather, the weather doesn't really affect the battery life there. So currently in the works right now, as I mentioned, looking really just to discuss and kind of get feedback with the Connect staff. They've been very, very helpful in this entire process. Rebecca Kiernan with Connect actually wrote the transition plan for the city, and she's been a great resource to have, really identifying the main goals and targets of the plan and just kind of having a back and forth. They've been a good facilitator with Duquesne Light. They've been a good facilitator with, you know, with grants, for example, like when we had our grant that was awarded to us, which still working on getting some facts there. But Connect has been a great resource, and they will continue to be a great resource as we move this plan forward. And then primarily with identifying the main goals and the targets of the overall plan is to make sure we're reaching, or I guess achieving or maintaining the same level of service delivery or exceeding that. That's kind of like the overall goal of this, and to kind of keep highlighting that process. But moving kind of through the plan, it's really the staff training, it's the infrastructure development, it's the vehicle proposal and purchasing procedures and things like that. And then also the overall maintenance and then rotation of the vehicles as they reach their useful life and things like that. But with that infrastructure development, it really goes towards where are we going to place these chargers? What kind of input are we going to have from the fire department staff when it comes to safety? What kind of information are we going to get from police? What information are we going to get from Public Works? And I think kind of foreshadowing a little bit towards the end with direction wise is Duquesne Light has a charging infrastructure program right now that the application has been, since working with them, it's been pretty much built out. They just kind of need a go ahead on it, where they're actually able to come out and do a full in-depth analysis on where charging stations can go and will go. And they'll come out with their engineers, they'll come out with their designers and everything, and give us a hard number on what it would cost to install charging stations. So I know we saw those numbers a couple months ago in the fall, and those were a good estimate, I would say. But when this application goes through, and it's not a binding application with Duquesne Light, but once we see that application go through, we can get some hard numbers and really understand what it would cost to install those charging stations. So, but that's again part of that overall plan of infrastructure development. That might be the first thing as of right now. But when we look in 25, 30 years, how are we going to build out that infrastructure, and where is it going to come from? So.
I vote for an electric street sweeper for Rudy.
Second.
So I just have two questions. So the total cost of ownership here, are the costs of ownership that are displayed here, do those jive with the lifespans that are mentioned here? Just because I don't see like a legend or reference to what the lifespan is. I'm just curious.
That I'm not entirely sure. I know they referenced a 7 to 10 year range. They've mentioned that in their meetings before. I can get a definitive lifespan on these types of vehicles. I know with this total cost of ownership graph on the last page, it's specifically towards that larger Peterbilt, heavy duty truck. So it's just one of those things where kind of getting some more hard numbers from them when it comes to statistics and things like that.
Yeah.
But
So I think for anything that we need to look at as a potential, we need to see the numbers. You know,
Yeah.
like I was mentioning to Chief at the last meeting, like we need to understand what the numbers are, exact numbers.
right.
So we need to have that as opposed to kind of a random chart.
Of course.
The second thing is when EA came in and we had a discussion, I can't remember the gentleman's name, but he mentioned that there was a nationally accepted number for the cost or how much would be attributed to the cost of removing a ton of carbon from the atmosphere. When we do things like total cost of ownership, we need to account for that in the calculation. So I don't know how we're gonna pin that, but that should be part of it. If we're saying that by us having electric vehicles, we are reducing carbon in the atmosphere, there is a relative price to that we can put in these calculations. We've got air monitors all over the municipality for reasons of monitoring the cleanliness and the health of our air, I think we're saying through our various policies that that's a benefit of doing things a certain way. That should somehow factor in. So as we start to do more of these analyses, we should factor that in. So like, we're gonna need to do more. Like, we need to dig in and either have conversations with manufacturers about those numbers, or the EPA, which I'm sure has those numbers. So like, we have to put that into the analysis. Without it, it's kind of incomplete.
Yeah, we had talked, I'm sorry,
No,
we had,
please.
we had talked in one of the earlier conversations around this topic about as we move forward, but probably even in advance of that, Craig, collecting data on such things as, you know, miles per gallon versus miles per charge, right? Collecting data on maintenance costs for like their ICE vehicles, internal combustion versus EVs, carbon reduction, recapture, because there's already a number out there for that, which, you know, we talked about. Longevity is another one, because again, we're gonna have to track longevity of an EV versus internal combustion engine. We're gonna have to talk about other costs and needs such as the infrastructure piece. And then we're gonna have to re-examine potentially our vehicle rotation schedule, right? So maybe our current rotation schedule isn't conducive to an EV because of how it goes, right? So those
From here to here to
those-
here, yeah.
SUVs that are non-police,
Mhm.
right? The manager's vehicle, right? If that had a different vehicle rotation, instead of going from me to one of the deputy chiefs to somebody in ISU, then to code enforcement, if it went from me to code enforcement, those are both limited use needs, right?
Right.
And maybe maybe, again, I'm gonna use a number that I don't know that it's there, but maybe it's a 10-year lifespan, right?
Yeah.
So it's 5 years for the manager and 5 years in
Mhm.
code enforcement.
Mhm.
Because I'll be honest with you, the manager's vehicle right now that I drive, I'm coming up on 3 years, it's got a little over 8,000 miles. So
Yeah.
it's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So that's all part of what we need to start giving the commission information on as we move forward.
Sure.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
That's actually one of the points I had in that last part of the fleet management and then rotation and data collection was understanding, again, do we need to reassess the rotation and what kind of information? Because speaking with Brian with West Mifflin, they haven't really dove into that data collection aspect yet. But with the financial management, I know they've dove into that data collection with miles per gallons and also the cost of how much we've been consuming fuel wise, so.
You mentioned EA is coming back at a certain point in time to maybe give us numbers or, you know, engineers and kind of rehash some of the recommendations they made. When do we see these numbers and like this analysis related to costs, options, stuff like that? I mean, I know we've been working on it for a while. Like, when do we get to the point where we have something to look at to kind of make decisions on?
I don't want to commit Greg to a time frame, but
I want to commit Greg to a time.
I know you do.
I mean, like, this is not like a
I don't wanna-
10-year
I'll
project.
do it that way. I don't want to answer the question
Yeah.
for Greg. So I'm gonna ask Greg if, you know, from what's a realistic timeline to provide the commission back with that information.
So realistically, I think with moving through with all the stuff that's kind of going at pace, the original memo that I had back in the fall was having a drafted plan in March. And I think we're still on board with that. It's moving through with advisory boards and things like that. And having a drafted plan, and again, foreshadowing the kind of goals and targets of direction of what the commission would like to see, that's definitely on the board for what exactly we're gonna look at data wise. The numbers, I messaged Eric Robb through Connect and he talked about that total cost or the community cost of carbon and things like that, and how the social cost, thank you. The social cost of carbon, and what that calculation, how it's calculated, things like that. So that's something that can definitely be added in that plan. I think March is still a good time frame.
And that's fine for the plan, which would lead to a policy, but I think Commissioner Grella, and he can correct me if I'm wrong, is looking for sort of that data that goes with being able to put a plan together for all of the things that we just discussed.
Can I interject? So a couple things, right? And speaking with Chief Haberman, after the last meeting as well, and then having some other conversations, on this topic. What I started to appreciate was that, providers like Duquesne Light, and they're doing yeoman's work, and I don't want to discourage what they're doing, are saying, we have apples. And the police are saying, that's nice, we have oranges. They're both round, we understand that, but there's things that need to be bridged. And how do we understand not, the total fleet cost, right? What is the service delivery cost? Regardless of whether I have one car or 5 EVs, right? If that's the same, if that's what's needed to provide the same level of service, right? Which again is, to our point, that is our goal. We do not want to diminish service regardless of the platform. What is the cost all in for the fleet? Because again, it could be 2 vehicles to 1 ICE vehicle, versus, or it could be 3 vehicles, it could be 1.5, we don't know. But I think looking at it 1-to-1 is a problem because there are other factors that have to be taken into account to kind of the service delivery that needs to occur. And so I've actually engaged a couple people, and I'm going to facilitate it through Connect, to say, look, you've worked in EVs, you've worked in policing and other, municipal functions. Can you start to help bridge this dialogue? Because again, apples and oranges are different topics, and we need to start building that kind of that common framework of understanding. And it's really not just us, right? It's every municipality, right? I'm sure LA, they buy 40, they're testing, right? They can drop the money on 40 just to play with it. We don't get that flexibility. So how do we start this process of understanding capacity and service delivery, rather than just saying it's 1-to-1, therefore let's make a transition because it's simply the social cost of carbon and we need to mitigate and transition. I'm a firm believer that the transition will happen, but I think it's going to be a question of when the trigger gets pulled based upon capacity. And again, I don't care if there's 3 vehicles or 1, as long as the costs are comparable, right, all in, and the service delivery is exactly the same or better, then I think we're in a place to say pull the trigger. But until then, until we have that comfort, I think it's premature.
I think it's fine to have those conversations about, the common terms or trying to figure out the difference between apples and oranges and how do we get to the one that bridges that. But we have a practical policy in place that demands we replace existing vehicles with carbon efficient vehicles. And we have a policy that says staff will make reports on what we're doing to do that. So we can't just sit on that and wait until a third party has this grand discussion. So we've passed a policy that says we need to do these things. These reports need to be generated and we need to report that out to the public according to this policy that we passed coming up on a couple of years. So we either need to scratch the policy and say, we messed up, we passed a policy before we understood that conversation, or we need to try to affect that policy.
Well, if we want to get technical, we didn't pass a policy, we passed a resolution.
Correct, that is true.
Which is aspirational.
Yeah.
There isn't a standing policy in place. I think we need one.
But the resolution does call for those things.
It does, 100%. And I think that was really the reason why I wanted it in there, is because, again, the goal of that resolution was to say, we are here today, we want to be somewhere by 2050, net zero. How do we get there, right? What is that journey? And again, I'm a firm believer that, look, the next 5-10 years, we might not be getting very far, but then we might see a dramatic, improvement because this transition has started to really kick off and the technology is there and the costs are appropriate. How do we help staff get to that place of having the policy that says, here are the triggers that are going to start, falling into place? Because again, I don't want to get into the one vehicle for one vehicle discussion, because again, Chief Haberman might be like, I can't do it. We're going to decrease service levels. But if we say, okay, that understood, how do we understand the transition plan, knowing that you need a certain level of service? And it might be, I might say, I have to buy 2 cars to replace 1 this year, because that's going to.
That's a perfect answer to a question.
Right, yeah.
We haven't gotten that information yet.
Agreed.
And that's what we need to have. We need to have and say, these options are available, but here are the limitations of them. Therefore, we need to do 2x
Right.
to equal 1x service now.
Right.
And it's going to cost this amount of money, because up till now, we haven't gotten that. That's what I'm asking for. I'm asking for, we don't have to have apples to apples comparisons. We need to understand, like you said, the same or better service level, and we need to understand what that's gonna cost, because from where we sit, that's the main concern. I just, one other question. You mentioned, this is kind of in the weeds, but you mentioned some of the electrical vehicles do not have stations at which Public Works employees could charge their tools, or stations on those electric vehicles that would be sufficient enough to charge those tools.
So with the Bright Drop, they have an inverter. They have an inverter on that you can run tools off of. During that demo, we attempted to run one of the larger tools on that, and it just did not perform. It did not function. I guess with the design of that inverter, because I guess more of the overall demonstration was more of a cargo. It's more of a cargo van, not a real utility van yet. Because again, it's a new vehicle, so I guess Chevrolet might be trying different things. But it just, the power was not there. The power was not there on that.
I was just gonna, maybe this is more of a question for you. I was curious as to what we use now to power our tools mobily.
I think with the carpenter's van, it's just based off of like
There's
the,
an inverter in the carpenter's van now.
So they have an inverter that,
Right, but it's, it's running off of the 12-volt system that is recharged by the alternator. It's not running off of the same power system that powers the vehicle.
got it.
And, and the problem with this is they're kind of running ancillary equipment off of that with a smaller inverter that has a lower amperage rating, because the wires are like 20 gauge instead of a heavier 12 or 10 gauge that are on the inverter that we have in our truck now.
Got it.
So it's just not as heavy. It won't support the higher draw. We did, to be in fairness, we tried like a hammer drill that has a pretty substantial amp draw, 13, 14 amps. But that's what's used out in the field.
Right, okay, got it. Thank you. That's all I got.
and then I think kind of what Mr. Grella was mentioning as well, just currently researching upfitters and upfit cost, to kind of understand where current costs are. We've looked at the Tesla Model Y, we looked at the Chevy Bright Drop, we looked at the F-150 Lightning, things like that. So I think we're moving towards kind of putting that in place within this plan. Because looking at the plan overall trend goals, like Commissioner Flynn mentioned, reaching a goal by 2050 or 20, specific dates. But I think this plan is designed, for what I've kind of taken back from it with discussions, is that it is not going to identify specific vehicles. It's more of a procedural policy by when vehicles need to be replaced, assessing those vehicles, and then presenting the data, presenting the information on carbon recapture, maintenance savings and things like that. But looking at the information we have right now, a lot of it's statistical average, industry averages and things like that. So it's somewhat difficult to pull hard numbers and present when we don't have that. I think the only vehicle we can really pull numbers from is our Bolt we have for the plant, or for the parking vehicles. So I think moving forward, still remaining high level, not necessarily identifying certain vehicles, but that could change. Again, trying to look for.
Not to interrupt you, but just to, I think, what I heard, what the commission is looking for, what Commissioner Grella had stated was, let's look, when we're talking about EVs, what are the options? In some cases, like the plow truck, there may not be one, okay? So I think at that point, we're done because it doesn't exist. But in other cases, there may be options. But with those options, those vehicles still come with some limitations.
Right.
What are those limitations? And how are they gonna affect service delivery? And then finally, if there's an option that has limitations, or if there's an options that can be an apples to apples for what we have now, what is that cost? Very similar to what we had the conversation about the police vehicles in Tesla, where that vehicle actually gets sold to the upfitter. The upfitter then sells the vehicle back to you. So in theory, you have an apples to apples now, but what is that cost? All in, right? For the vehicle with the upfit with any needed infrastructure
Mhm.
versus what that cost is for the ICE vehicle. So that they have all the information they need to make an informed decision. At that point, it's up to the commission as to whether or not
Right.
to move forward with any of the options.
Yeah, the question is not, if it absolutely is not available and cannot be done, then yes, that's an answer. Other than that, the answer is, here's how we do it, and here's how much it's gonna cost.
Just want to make sure that, I thought that's what I heard. I just want to make sure that you.
Yep. And that goes right into researching the upfitting costs as we're currently doing, so. And then just kind of next steps and a little bit of direction is, I guess, moving forward and executing that application with Duquesne Light to have some hard numbers on if we were to install charging infrastructure for the fleet, where would those stations be? And then again, those hard numbers on what the investment cost, because they have a make-ready program that they invest funds into, so they would also kind of determine what type of funds they're gonna be allocated to that program, whether it's infrastructure development, things like that, or actually purchasing vehicle charging stations themselves. But again, we'd have to move forward with that application to see exactly what the numbers are. So
Is Duquesne Light the only organization that can provide that information?
not sure off the top of my head. I could find out. I just know that they have, just being our utility provider, they have a lot of, impact on that. So, I mean, we could definitely go forth and
I mean, it's worth looking into if there are other providers. I mean, the energy might come from Duquesne, but that doesn't mean, for them to be doing installations of infrastructure.
I don't know if West Penn Power or any of the other utility companies.
Yeah.
But I think based on what you said earlier about for applying for that, having them come out, there's no cost or obligation to the municipality. That would give us some additional data in terms of, it's one thing to look at a map and say we should put a charging station here, and we should put one here, but to actually have them come out in the field and look at the practicality of, okay, so where's the power source? Where do you have to run it from? What are the potential costs to do that? All of those types of things.
Yeah.
Unless the commission has an objection, I don't think there's a.
Yeah, I don't think so. I just don't, we shouldn't do that in lieu of
Oh, no.
other providers, potential. We
Right,
should look
and I
into
think
that.
that's, Greg will have to.
Yeah.
And Connect can probably give you some.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I think just with Duquesne Light, they're offering that investment due to them being the utility provider investment into that.
Yeah,
So
there's a
there's a vested interest.
vested interest there.
Let's move over to sidewalk expansion.
Yes,
Thank you, Greg.
Thanks,
thanks.
Just leave it up. I got it. Moving on to sidewalk expansion. There we go. All right. Thank you, Commissioners. So I'm back once again, talking about sidewalks and next steps within the community. So I'll just run through some high level stuff, and then I know we have the sort of ongoing pending project on Woodland, which I sent you all a memo on before I was out on my parental leave. And now that I'm back, a lot of this stuff is review that you've seen in prior presentations as well. So about 77% of the municipality currently has sidewalks. But we have, a variety of existing conditions that are out there in the community. There's some, sidewalks that are set back from the curb, like you see on the left-hand side, some, like on the right-hand side here where they're set against the curb, and then some places there are gaps where the sidewalks stop. There are some places where, property owners have installed pavers that don't necessarily meet municipal, standards for sidewalks, but a walking path does exist adjacent to the roadway, and then streets without sidewalks in general. So a couple of years ago, actually end of 2023, and then one of their neighborhood greenways that just, some cut through places where there's roads that have a green space between them where they were, on a laid out plan were a right of way, but were never developed or dedicated to the municipality. So this is kind of the meat of everything, and because I put this together after coming back, you didn't have time to make it into your packets, so I will hand you this one sheet
everything else in here was just a review of stuff you'd already seen.
Thanks.
You're welcome. This is the status of kind of where we are with our sidewalk expansion program. Or ones that we had studied. So back at the end of 2023, I'd given a presentation to the commission in discussion session. Commission had Gateway do a TSL type size location analysis on 7 sections of, or actually 6 streets, 7 total sections, because there were 2 different parts of Lakemont Drive that were looked at. So 6 municipal streets at the time were studied by Gateway. They did the type size location analysis for those. And then those streets were considered by the commission. At the time, the commission designated Woodland as the first street that we wanted to dip our toes into a foray of sidewalk expansion. So to date, about $450,000 has been allocated by the commission through budgeting processes, and we're ongoing with resident engagement. And I believe the bid is slated to go out within the next week or so on that. So hopefully we'll be able to get some contractor numbers in, and then continue our work communicating with the residents on that project and moving it forward for a summer installation this year, with the goal of wrapping that up right around the first week of school, so that we can get it done while the kids are not walking to school, since Woodland is right adjacent to Foster Elementary. So the real purpose of tonight, though, is to kind of consider where the commission wants to go next. The mobility board prioritized 3 streets in their recommendations. Their number 1 priority was Kelso Road. Number 2 was Greenhurst, along with the 1 section of Lakemont that is adjacent to Greenhurst, basically from Greenhurst all the way down to Kurt. And then the 3rd one was Country Club Drive, which was not one of the original streets that were studied as part of the Gateway TSL analysis. The commission requested that as an additional study area. The mobility board placed that as their number 3 priority. That section of Country Club does have very large, very stately trees along it. So the TSL analysis there is not something as simple as put a sidewalk on the high side or the low side. There's some additional analysis there where it may have to be considered whether or not we need to realign that roadway and make it a one-way street and actually bump the curbs out and install sidewalks where the cartway currently is, something along those lines. But that is a little more in-depth analysis. That TSL study is not complete yet there. But really the question for the commission is, where do we want to start looking next? There's also 1 additional request that's kind of in the process now. Back in 2013, we updated, in 2013, we approved the initial sidewalk expansion policy. In 2023, we updated the policy. And so the request that we received from the residents on Salem is following the steps of the new policy that will work its way through the process and eventually get to the mobility board for them to include in their priority list. So I'll, with that, kind of turn it over to the commission for any questions or where you would like to.
Not sure, but I think Anna.
I have a question.
Sure.
Yeah. One piece of information that I found to be missing on this, and it really pertains to Kelso, is how many children walk on Kelso?
Not a lot.
Oh, well, why are we making it a number 1 priority? I'm sorry, I don't understand why we wouldn't do one of the others that had more kids.
Because there are a lot of people who want to walk on Kelso.
I don't know, I look at things like 0.8 miles from the school and other things that may, this is what's that old adage about people who say they watch public television because it sounds good and yet they don't really watch it. You've heard that before, I'm sure. So I kind of look at this and go like, are you really gonna walk that, or are you just saying you will? And I don't mean to throw shade on anybody, but there just was nobody walking on Kelso. So that's my 2 cents. I think that ought to be factored in.
Kelso is also a state road, so I don't know if that will add an additional layer. PennDOT will probably look at it and say, if you want to put them in, go ahead and put them in. We're not going to maintain them. We won't take any responsibility for them, but just that would be 1 extra agency that needs to.
I mean,
But there's not, it doesn't even feed in from other neighborhoods. I mean, there's that one Oxford Drive, is that what it is, that's up on the hill that feeds down to it? Pembroke, Oxford, right up in there, but other than that, Good God.
I mean, these are board recommendations. I mean, the commission has to make a decision one way or
Yeah.
another, so.
I just don't, I feel like that ought to be part of it. And I think, Chief, you guys did a walking study on that of the number of people, right? Am I
We
crazy?
did a speed study,
Yeah.
yes, ma'am, and then we also monitored the travel, and they came down Kelso, there were a few people we saw walking, but yet it wasn't high numbers.
It just feels like if you have limited resources, you put them where there's the most need.
Do we have other info from mobility? Did like any attached notes come with recommendations or no?
No, they looked at everything that was in the list that was provided from, Gateway originally, right, in terms of the different options. And they went, and actually, they did fantastic work. They all went out, they looked at all the
Yeah.
different sites.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know that they have a list per se, or write notes, but,
Right.
but they did go through an extensive discussion.
So this, it may be hard to see on the map here, but
Yeah.
the bright green sections are where sidewalks currently exist. So in Kelso, there is some up at the top near Bower Hill. And it's
Right.
really this section between Moreland and Pembroke where
There's nothing.
there are no sidewalks, correct. Then as you go farther down here past Pembroke, there are some down here on this side as you start to loop down and back around where it transitions into being Rock Hollow. So
Does it connect to other sidewalks that take you to the school or no?
Bower
no,
Hill,
If you want Bower Hill,
yeah,
Bower Hill does.
Bower Hill.
so I was gonna ask a question, not to complicate things.
I already did.
I can turn off the street trees, so that may make it easier to see.
Here was my question.
Yeah.
The police department in the past, and still now, works with the school district related to
Yeah.
safe walking routes to
Yeah.
schools for children. Is there any value, we're talking about having a future meeting with representatives from the school district in sort of getting their input in terms of,
Sure.
they have a much better feel for where their
Kids are coming
kids
from.
are coming from. I'm not saying that's the purview of the mobility board and the commission's going to ultimately fund these, but just if you wanted some additional input, that was just a country club could be another one because it's by the school and so.
I mean, I know we're talking about having joint meetings with the school board, but if we want real info, I would meet with the PTAs. They're gonna be better informed than the school directors will be on that.
Mr.
where
Gill,
they-
if I could add, if I could add, just to weigh in on this, Dr. Freeze and I have had conversations about that exact
Yeah.
topic, and where we used to have safe walking route certifications that were offered by the state, where we had a lieutenant in-house that was certified to sort of assess safe walking routes. That program has since gone away, and we are working with the school district now to sort of assess with the changing time with, people being driven to school,
Yeah.
really less walkers out of the 5,000 kids. We're finding the go zones are so overcrowded, it's clear that not everybody is walking. And
Right.
so what we're trying to do is balance that out. So we have had some very preliminary conversations about looking into that exact fact, and we'll continue to do that. We can weigh in and give any assistance we can to that conversation and really assessing where we're
But I
at.
guess is the question, are more people driving because they feel it's not safe and don't have access to sidewalks, or are they driving because it's more convenient?
And there again, I think just to weigh in a little bit on this,
Yeah.
the one thing I'll say is, we don't know that, and that's something we could find out through the school district. I think, and they would be the best point of contact on how they, whether it's through a Q&A, if a mailer they put out through the PTA, or how they assess, why your kid's not walking, but you can see, the go zones are so overcrowded, it's clear that there's a disproportionate amount of kids walking today than they did in the past.
I would guess that it is just more parents feeling compelled to drop off their kids, but I also simultaneously don't feel like accommodating that. I mean, that's, we've got a school district that's built for walking, and I think that the less convenient we make driving, the more we kind of live up to that promise. I mean, you hate seeing those go so packed.
It seems sort of silly that every kid's within a mile of a elementary school.
So just to look at the second recommendation from the mobility board, because I think it does answer some of those other questions that the commissioners asked. So the Greenhurst Lakemont section.
Yeah.
There is an existing sidewalk on Greenhurst that leads down to where the entrance to the park and the high school is. So it would,
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
Greenhurst sidewalk would connect this sidewalk from Bower Hill Road to the sidewalk here going down the big hill where they write their graduation years illegally. I'm sitting next to the solicitor. I have to
Public
mention-
art, it's
I have to
public art.
mention that it's illegal to- At any rate, I'm not saying I'm opposed to it, I'm saying that it is not, okay, at any rate, I digress. So a Greenhurst sidewalk would connect two existing sections of sidewalk,
Right.
would provide a connection to the high school, and then the wraparound on Lakemont
Yeah.
does lead over to Hoover Elementary here, where there's a sidewalk on Larchdale coming up and over the hill at Firwood. So that one, to me, I
Makes
wasn't
sense.
asked for a recommendation,
Sense.
but makes more sense than, I'll say, serves a greater population and
Yes,
connects multiple schools,
right.
versus Kelso kind of being more on the
Makes
periphery,
sense.
as Commissioner Swager was.
Urban design wise, it makes sense.
We don't build bridges where people swim, so that's not how we determine things. So we don't always determine where sidewalks go, but where people currently aren't walking.
Correct.
Wait, where they aren't, no, I said it wrong, I have it backwards. Andrew said it right, a lot of people would like to walk there.
Part of the
Fine, I
effort
get
is
your
No,
point.
Yeah,
close to schools. I mean, that's
yeah,
obvious. We talked
but,
about
but the
that.
Lakemont Greenhurst one makes a lot of sense. I mean, that connects and. I mean,
Well, just a couple things. One, I don't know that the actual final decision has to be made here. I do think we need to be thinking about, aligning budget against
Yeah.
next
Yeah.
year.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. So I think we do need to give staff some level of direction to say, yeah, pursue this and include it as part of budget, or not. But then there's also, with the safe walking routes and all those factors, also the active transportation plan,
Right,
which
right.
should inform this stuff as well, because again,
yes,
Kelso's not our road, but some of these are our roads, and hopefully that will help us understand what our safe walking networks should be,
Mhm.
and therefore where we should be putting
Yeah.
more sidewalks and where we should be thinking about other
other
treatments.
possible, yeah.
Yes.
But I do think, I have absolutely no problem with Lakemont, Greenhurst.
And also the concept, which, it's kind of like walking on Washington Road. A lot of people do walk on Washington Road because it's fairly flat, but a lot of people, it's not a very pleasant walking experience. First of all, the sidewalk's right against the street, cars are like this, sirens, trucks, you name it. You're much more likely to turn into Phil's neighborhood, my neighborhood, and walk in that area where it's not as busy. Again, Kelso, you're putting something on where, sure, it's needed because it's a really busy street, but the way you design it is gonna be absolutely important as to whether people will use it or not. You can't just put a sidewalk in and, oh God, now we're all gonna use it. If it's still totally unpleasant, people aren't gonna use it.
We've all seen Strodes with,
Yeah.
with sidewalks,
Right.
that no one would ever go near.
No one ever walk on them, so I think that has to all be thought out.
Agreed.
Speak up.
I'll agree with you.
Okay,
Everything
good.
you say.
So for tonight's purposes, we're not necessarily committing to doing anything, but just kind of updating the commission on where we are with things. And Commissioner Flynn's point is correct, that at some point, as we're putting
Budget,
together
yeah.
the budget, the capital improvement
Right.
program for the future, the commission, I thought, made it very clear this year during the budget process and the capital improvement
Yeah.
process that you wanted to see,
Yeah.
phased approaches to sidewalks. So just looking for some direction on where the commission would like to see, if sidewalks are going to be a continual investment over the years, where do we want to focus first? Is it going to be Lakemont Greenhurst? Is it going to be Kelso? Is it going to be country clubs? Is it going to be somewhere else? The mobility board made their recommendations. Ultimately, it's the commission's decision where you want to go. We're just looking for some direction on how you want to see it when, the capital plan comes in front of you.
I would put sufficient numbers to do Lakemont Greenhurst. If we want to shift directions, at least that number is a
Mhm.
stable proxy
Mhm.
Agreed, and it
for intent.
seems to address priority one, two in a different way as well.
I'm assuming we're only gonna have the funds to realistically do one project, so, you know, the Greenhurst and Lakemont are a combination. So it's
Yeah.
probably gonna,
It may be phased over multiple years. I think we're
Yeah.
gonna learn some lessons with the woodland
Yeah,
thing,
Yeah.
too, that,
yeah.
you know, how much can we get done in a summer during, you know, when school is off? Because we don't,
Mhm.
if one of the drivers for installing sidewalks is we want to enhance our safe walking routes to school, we don't want to be doing construction in those areas during school time. So that's kind of a limited, you know, 85, 90-day window from when school ends the second week of June to when it starts the next to
Right.
last week of August. The timeframe for construction of these projects is consolidated more so than some other construction projects. So I think we're gonna learn a lot this year doing woodland
Woodland,
that we'll be able to apply to some of these in the future, so.
but it sounds like we've got, so Country Club, you've got your TSL study, which is not done. Actually, that's really the only one. If we decide to do something on Salem, potentially that would be an additional study or some level of analysis.
Mhm.
It makes sense to keep getting that information. Like, I don't think we want to stop
Yeah.
getting information and
Agreed.
costs, and then, because we're gonna need to understand that for the next cycle of approvals anyway.
Yeah, and all of these are gonna vary due to what I will say, people have installed within the right of way
I know.
where those sidewalks would go,
Sure.
because that's going to, remember, that's completely 100% a resident cost
No, I know,
for the removal or
absolutely.
relocation of whatever that is.
And then you're really clear about what they can do for the retaining wall. It has input, never mind. Okay.
Thank you, appreciate
Yeah.
it.
So just as I exit, so I'm clear, the commission's direction for when we're putting CIP stuff together is you want to see the Lakemont Greenhurst section
Mhm.
as the highest priority one in the structure. And then Kelto number 2, and we'll kind of go from there afterwards based on, once the TSL study
Yeah.
on Country Club is done and we get some structure.
Some numbers.
And I think they also want to continue getting some numbers for the other sections. If Salem moves forward, they'll want numbers for that, and
Absolutely.
also for Country Club,
Yeah.
for a couple different, if there's different options.
I mean, I know Country Club's gonna cost more than what the initial engineer's assessment was, because it's a different project.
It's, yeah, different than any else.
But they should be looking at the one way. I mean, I've had that conversation with residents, and so far everyone's been open to it. So,
Country Club being one way, going up.
yeah,
And so what, would you do what's the other one, Fruithurst?
I think you do the right side of Country Club.
The one challenge there is if it's one way coming up, the next street to go down is Audubon, which is a private street.
Well, on the left, but on the right,
On the
there's
other side, there's
Fruithurst.
Fruithurst.
It's Fruithurst.
I'm still a little bit of therapy from the last time somebody proposed making a street municipality one way, so.
It's a pretty short
It
segment.
was, over near Altoona, right in there, right?
No, Academy.
Academy. Oh, I'm sorry.
Residents invested in their own yard signs.
Oh, that's right, I remember that, yeah.
That's never.
EMS,
Just kidding.
Oh, let's talk about it.
Thank you.
So, thanks. Ian.
Thank you, Ian.
Thank you for the clear direction. Appreciate
EMS study, there is an agenda item tonight for the commission to award an EMS study to, again, take a look at how we are delivering EMS services to our residents, and it's not so much how, it's an overall look at from everything from staffing to scheduling to financial to capital plan to strategic plan. Looking at how those services are provided in other communities. Again, just so that we have a better understanding of what some of those challenges are and potentially a path forward for the municipality and actually hopefully for all of the municipalities that are currently part of MERS. So we issued an RFP. We had two respondents. I set up a Zoom interview with both. And Steve and I were part of those Zoom interviews. We are recommending a firm called Pitch and Associates. I think either firm probably could have provided what we needed. We just had a better comfort level with Pitch for a couple of reasons. We met with a gentleman by the name of Todd Sheridan. He talked about how do EMS agencies increase their revenue stream. He talked about a revenue cycle management, analysis of subscription plans, donation drives, grants, grant opportunities. He talked about a lot of costs being shifted to municipalities and how to try to address some of those things. Obviously, the recognition that performance drives cost, so that if you want a certain level of service, it comes with a certain level of cost. We all appreciate that and understand it. They also operate a number of EMS services around the United States, so they have a firsthand working knowledge of EMS services and delivery of those services. He said they manage about 1 million transports a year. And so they are very good at analyzing appropriate staffing, those types of things. One of the things that really kind of was a benefit, I think, is that they are currently doing a study in Pine Township. They're also doing a study out in Peters Township. For the one in Pine, that's Allegheny County, they are really, I'll say, writing their own program to be able to pull the data from Allegheny County 911 so that they can put it in a form where it serves them and gives them the utility to look at the things that they need to look. He talked about total time on task, the time of the day, the issue of diminishing returns, and the fact that EMS is sort of in an evolutionary phase. We started here, basically they were using a station wagon. We then moved into, I'll say, a van, and now we have sort of the modern day ambulances. And talked about how important it will be just to have the data to understand what the issues are and work collaboratively with MARTS to try to move forward. And again, I'll let Ann interject here, but I think based on everything that we got from that conversation, we are very comfortable that they'll be able to deliver what we're looking for in about a 5 to 6 month timeframe, realistically. And that's their timeframe, but Ann, you were on the call, so.
Yeah, I was impressed with them. I think one of the best things that you just spoke about, which probably none of us were that aware of, was their ability to build a program to extract information from emergency services at Allegheny County. I know Chief Turkle has worked to try to get information on mutual aid. That's where, someone comes in and helps us when we're short-staffed, or we go out and help others when we're short-staffed. And those are pretty critical numbers as to what's going on. And Chief Turkle has struggled to get those out of Allegheny County. It's pretty difficult. And having that program would just be, really revolutionary in many ways.
And plus, they've already engaged Allegheny County in that.
Oh, yeah, they already have
conversation.
they already have the agreement with Allegheny County to do it, which is a big time saver, I think. That's probably the best.
Yeah, and we talked with them also about, looking at
How you staff.
how you staff, but EMS service is funded in a variety of different ways throughout Allegheny County. Some do it on a per capita basis, some do it on a per household basis. Some authorities, because they have the ability, have passed really a fee, if you will. It's not an optional fee. You're required to pay that. Ross Westview, I think, just put that in place in 2023. First year was a challenge from a collection standpoint. Last year was much better. Hopefully 2025, they hope to hit their target number. So again, just taking a look at all of the different, I'll say, financing models that are out there, figuring out which one's a good fit for us. I have never had any issues with the level of medical care or service that we receive from MERS. I'm just, I think we just need to have more information, and I think honestly, it'll be beneficial to MERS to have that additional information as well, so. But I will take the staff lead for this project, just in respect for the other issues that Ian has on his plate, plus I think I may hopefully be successful in sort of bridging some of the issues that we need to try to address here, so. And we will keep the commission fully informed as we move through the process. We'll bring the consultant in to meet with you at various points that want to talk to different parties that we've identified for them. Andrew McCreary will be one of those as our finance director. Obviously, they'll talk to Doug DeForest from MERTS and a number of other people. Chief Turkle. We'll also have them meet with the emergency, I forget what their title is at St. Clair Hospital, but
Right, yes.
the service director at St. Clair Hospital, just again, getting input and data from everybody that touches the process.
Sounds great.
I was ahead of schedule. Love it. Boards, authorities, updates. Well, I guess we just got MRSA.
Yeah, you just got MRSA pretty much, yeah. Well, MRSA did, a little bit more of an update. MRSA did, as you know, Steve and I voted against the community assessment amount in, I think it was November. Yes, it was November, in November. Because we asked that this study be done. And that we were willing, Keith came to the meeting, we were willing to pay what we had paid last year. And we were willing to entertain an ask for more as the year went on, once the study had been done and we had some feel for what was actually going on. And so that motion was made at the January MRSA meeting, that the community assessments from last year be done so that they had a funding, they'd be able to fund them, so. The big thing with MRSA, and I think it's important for us all to remember, is that there are existing labor unions with MRSA, and there's an existing staff. It's not in my field, it is not a great job because there are a lot of injuries that happen from lifting people, and a lot of people die. I mean, trying to save people all the time and having a number of people die, the statistics are just not great. It's tough. It's a hard job. And these people work really hard at it, put their heart and soul into it. I think it's really important that we reconfirm that we are not trying to necessarily kill MRSA, that what we're really trying to do is look at how it goes, how we can sustain it from this point forward. What's the best way to do that? And I think it's important that we reiterate that, because some of the issues that have cropped up have nothing to do with how MRSA is not managed. They really involve things like how insurance companies are allowed to pay for emergency services or not pay, and things like that, which really are a whole nother bailiwick, really more lobbying than anything else.
Well, they still have to deal with them.
Yeah, it's tough to deal with it, but it's not, something that they willfully.
Right, it's not a service that they provide or don't provide,
Yeah.
right?
And I think to a certain extent, right, that is on the heads of the electeds of all the
Yes.
communities.
I agree.
We have to make sure that we're creating the right environment within which they can succeed.
Mhm.
I think it's an important discussion to have is this the right environment? Are we setting the plate in a way that they are going to be able to succeed? I agree 100%. I'm in the midst of taking my EMT class right now. I'm learning a lot and I can only say how impressed I am with the paramedics and the work that they do.
It's amazing.
It is truly amazing. And everybody I talk to says, I want the paramedics from MERTS. Yeah, but that doesn't mean that we're sustaining an operation where they are fulfilled and they are wanting to stay. And how do we ensure that that is going to be the case long-term? That's the important conversation.
It really is.
I think if you asked 100 people how that service works,
It would
a
know.
majority of them would tell you that the municipality takes care of it, or the fire department does, without knowing how any of it works. And I guess what we'll have to have a discussion about is when these numbers come back and we have a little bit more of an understanding maybe of what things should look like or could look like, and then resolve that with where we are and where we might need to be with MRTA operating as they do. We get into these conversations almost like we do, you know, is this a service that the municipality provides? How deep do we get involved in those conversations? Is it a service that we should provide? And where do we go from there? I think we're gonna end up having those, much like, I don't want this comment to be mistaken that I'm equating EMS to like waste management, but waste management is it's a service that the municipality doesn't provide, but we get involved in negotiating pricing. And, you know, and in part, you know, like we don't fund that necessarily, right? But, you know, it's a similar conversation that we're probably gonna have with MRTA. Yeah.
Let's, the Resiliency Board, we met last week. The Preservation Subcommittee is requesting that they make some changes to the website regarding Section 106 review.
Those are in progress, by the way.
Right.
We'll let you know when
Yeah.
they're complete.
Thank you. There is kind of coming up the chain from the Economic Business District Subcommittee, some recommendations in terms of vacancy in the commercial district, signage, sort of ordinances, minimum maintenance kind of issues, which I'm fully in support of. So that is going to continue to work on that, and then I'll eventually get to the entire committee, but I'm sure it's something we'll have a discussion of in here sometime, but again, looking forward to that. Eric Miller with the mentioned that currently we've come out of the Main Street program, but we're going to reapply to go, to be a part of that again. So that's kind of a typical thing to happen.
Being a partnership.
Sorry,
Yeah.
partnership.
You do
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, thank you. I appreciate the clarification. So, not much to worry about there, but all in all, pretty positive meeting. Things are moving forward there. And then in addition, Andrew and I attended a meeting last Friday morning with Eric from the partnership and with Pashik regarding some of the, what that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So some of the, thoughts on Activate and what they're looking at in terms of Persuade and Alfred and Clearview Commons. And it was great. Some excellent recommendations together there that, everybody kind of put their 2 cents in, but that's all looking very good.
School district, the last board meeting I attended and also the PTA meetings I attended, the conversation is focused on sidewalks, requesting for more of them. Better painting of crosswalks. I know we've had
Yeah.
conversations about that and making sure those are done. I think Rudy and his team have done a pretty good job about taking care of those before school starts, but there have been some conversations about striping that maybe is, super light and, could be better done, that kind of thing. Conversations have come up about people running red lights near schools, and going through crosswalks and things like that. So the school directors that I met with are asking if there's anything that we can do to just post more police near crosswalks in schools. I know our police do routes in the morning and I don't know if they focus on the schools, but I know they're very active driving past the schools. I see them all the time when I drop my daughters off at school. But they're asking if there is ways for us to post up in some of those major intersections to catch people who are going through red lights in and around school times.
Yeah.
So that was a question. In particular, they mentioned Washington, Mellon, and Lincoln as the 3 schools where people have reported running through red lights and, near misses of kids and stuff like that. So less so at the high school, but more so at Washington, Mellon, and Lincoln, probably because they're more traffic streets. People are moving a little bit faster there.
He's got an issue, just if you're trying to make that left onto Ralston, people are paying attention to the cars that are coming this way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not the.
Yeah. So anything we could do there, I don't know, maybe you could chat with the police chief and, you could figure out a way to look at some of that. Yeah. Next month, the school board is going to review their finance policies. So those are coming up for review. So they're gonna be looking at that. Part of what they'll discuss are, ways to facilitate, and they had a large donation to help with the scoreboard at the,
High school, yeah.
thank you, the football field, so they're gonna look at ways to maybe do some additional things like that, and I think that might require a change in some of their financial policies, so they're reviewing that. They're also reviewing their work on their, kind of their version of a comprehensive plan is going through the works now too, so.
Strategic.
Their strategic plan, thank you, that's what they call it, yep. Strategic plan for community, that was mostly done. They had focus groups and then they're continuing to develop that. So that information is posted publicly on their website. That's it from school. We've got a couple, 10 minutes. All right.
Wow.
That's actually.
And yes.
Yep.
Yeah, I know, golly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Short this meeting.
Yeah. I mean, no, I know.
That would be welcome.
Yeah.
Sir.
Yeah.